What's up, everybody? So for the last 10 days, I've been glued to my television watching the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. And as I've been watching these games, I have discovered that there's some very, very major lessons that I believe that every Christian can learn from these Olympic Games. So what I want to do in this video is I want to highlight three interesting people that are connected to these Olympic Games. First and foremost being Sha'Carri Richardson, who qualified for these Olympics in the United States, but got disqualified because she tested positive for marijuana. And then I want to look at world's #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, as it relates to his exit from these Olympic Games. And then finally, I want to take a look at Simone Biles, who was expected to do a clean sweep of the women's gold in gymnastics. Okay, first up, Sha'Carri Richardson. Once again, if you're not familiar with her story, she registered the fastest time in the United States in the 100-meter dash and was expected to compete for the gold medal in these Olympics. But shortly after that, she tested positive for marijuana and as a result got disqualified for even being able to compete in these games. So there's a few lessons that I think we can learn from her story as believers. Number one is whenever you make a mistake and when you fail in life, be sure to own up to it.
So tell me, what happened? What led up to this positive test?
Just honestly, I want to take responsibility for my actions. I know what I did. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm allowed not to do, and I still made that decision. But not making an excuse or looking for any empathy in my case.
Lesson number two is that God may not let you get away with something that he let somebody else in the same situation get away with. I hear a lot of people saying, well, you know what? Everybody was smoking weed and everybody was doing this. And you know what? It's not a big deal. It was legal in her state. And so therefore it shouldn't be a big deal. But the reality is that, you know what? Some other people very well may be doing it and they got away with it. But for whatever reason, God didn't allow her to actually get away with it. And I think there's some lessons that we can learn in our own lives, which is the fact that just because other people are getting away with certain things, and it seems like they're doing it without any sort of negative consequences, it doesn't mean that we can do those same things and expect God to let us get away with it. Number three, be careful judging somebody for doing something that you more than likely did at some point in your life as well. I saw a lot of people judging this young lady for smoking weed and being stupid and making a bad decision, and she should have known better. But how many bad decisions have we made in our lives, and how many times have we done things that we've regretted? Let me give you a perfect example. You have a lot of people that judge women who get pregnant out of marriage. And it's like, hey, why would you do this? Or how couldn't you, why wouldn't you have been smarter? But yet they don't realize that, okay, how many times have you been guilty of having sex before marriage, or maybe even unprotected sex? The fact is that it could have happened to you just as easily as it happened to somebody else. It's just the grace of God that God didn't allow something that happened to one person to also happen to you. But I believe another major lesson we can learn from Sha'Carri is that whenever we get outside of God's intended will, there will always be consequences. 2 Timothy 2:5 says, an athlete is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. God has boundaries. God has guidelines that have been set up for our good. But whenever we get outside of those boundaries, we are putting ourselves in a position where we could ultimately lose out on a blessing or something very, very important. Now, let's move on to character number two. And this guy is very interesting. His name is Novak Djokovic. If you're not familiar with him, he is currently, as we speak, the world's #1 best men's tennis player in the world. Like, this guy's crushing, he's killing everybody. And just to get you a little caught up on the story, he was on pace this year to do something that had not been done before by any male player and had only been done once in history of tennis, which is to do what's called the Golden Slam, which is whenever you win all 4 major tournaments, the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open, and then in the same calendar year, year also win the Olympic gold medal. It's only been done once in history in 1988 by Steffi Graf. So earlier this year, he already won the Australian Open, check. He also already won the French Open, check. He also already won the Wimbledon, check. So now he's trying to compete for the Olympic gold, and he gets to the quarterfinal match, and he doesn't do so well. And as a result, he has a major blow up. First, he throws his racket into the stands, which is crazy. Thankfully, there's no people there. And then later on in the match, he gets so angry that he smashes his racket against the post of the net in profuse anger. So clearly, this guy is not happy with himself. So the first thing we can learn from Novak Djokovic is that issues from our past, if we don't deal with them, will always come back to bite us later. I wish I could say that this was the first time that we've seen Novak Djokovic have some angry outbursts, but the reality is that he has been doing this throughout his entire career. But here is the second lesson that I want us to really grasp, and that is the fact that oftentimes, we need to make sure that we don't confuse not being tested by an issue with us actually having gained victory in an issue. Let me explain. You see, it's easy for us to think that maybe he had gotten past his issues of anger in his career because he's been killing everybody. He's been winning. Listen, winning and success cover and solve a lot of problems. It covers some of our issues, right? Whenever we're on top. But our true nature and who we are is oftentimes revealed in the midst of adversity. It's whenever we are tested with these issues and how we respond to those tests which determines whether we are actually getting victory. Let me give you another example. Let's just say that you have always struggled with sexual temptation. Well, it's easy for you to think that maybe you've gained victory in that area when you're not in a relationship with somebody because you're not constantly being tested with sexual temptation. But whenever you get into a relationship with somebody, when you're in love, whenever you have strong attraction towards that person, and you're constantly being tested with temptation in that area, it is then and only then that you can actually and accurately assess whether you've truly gotten victory in this area. The last thing that I'll say about Novak Djokovic in his defense is that we as believers need to be very careful about passing judgment on somebody based on their worst moments. Because if we're honest about it, none of us would want somebody to judge us in the most embarrassing, humiliating, and regretful moments of our lives as well. So these people have the privilege of being on stage and having their life flash before us. But more than likely, if our worst moments were recorded and put out on social media, we wouldn't want everybody in the world to be judging us either. And then the last person that I want to take a look at is none other than Simone Biles, and she is considered by most to be the GOAT in women's gymnastics, right? She's won several gold medals in the past, and she was predicted, and many people believe that she was on pace to do a clean sweep and win all of these gold medals in the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games. But to our surprise, she actually ended up pulling out of these Olympic Games due to some mental health issues, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And she's recently decided to compete in one other event. But the reality is that she pulled out. So I think there are a few lessons that we can learn from Simone Biles. And the first major one is super important. And that is the fact that constantly trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of us will oftentimes lead to poor mental health. You know, whether it's you're trying to live up to the media or social media or your parents or your spouse or people from your job or your boss or your pastor, a spiritual leader or whoever, if you are going through life and you're constantly trying to be a people pleaser and you're trying to find your identity in what people say about you and who they say you are and how pleased they are with your decisions and all of the things that go along with finding your identity in somebody else and trying to make sure that you're constantly living up to somebody else's expectations, my friend, that is a recipe for mental health disaster. This is where it's super important if you're a believer to make sure you get your identity in God. Pay attention to what God says about you and who God says you are, as opposed to focusing so much on trying to please everybody else and live up to these unrealistic expectations. Number 2, be careful how you talk about people or to people who have mental health issues. The Bible says anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. If you are dealing with somebody who has depression or anxiety or any sort of mental health issue that you may not be dealing with yourself, it's easy for you to look at this person and say, you just need to get over it. You need to get past this. You need to move forward. What's wrong with you? Why are you so sad? Why are you so depressed? Why are you so worried about the future and all these different things? And it's easy for somebody who's not dealing with mental health issues to pass judgment or to use their tongue or their words in a way that can actually make their actual mental health issue even worse. We need to make sure that we are affirming, encouraging, and helping people get victory in this area. Another great lesson we can learn from Simone Biles is we need to learn how to celebrate other people when it's not our day. One of the things that I loved was that even though Simone Biles was not competing in the majority of these events in the Olympic Games, we still saw her cheering her teammates on and giving them a hug and giving them advice and affirming them, even though it wasn't her day. And you know, it's easy for us as believers to covet other people's success or to covet when somebody else is getting married whenever we're still single, or to not be able to celebrate when somebody else has a child and we're not able to have children, or somebody else gets a promotion and we're not able to get that promotion, or somebody makes more money than us and we're not making that much money. It's easy for us to struggle celebrating somebody else in their success whenever we're not experiencing that same success. And I think we can be encouraged to see that Simone Biles was able to do just that. And then the last thing I'll say about Simone is that we need to all be careful about judging things or judging people without having all the facts. You know, so many people went to social media and they were just criticizing her. She's not patriotic. She doesn't love her country. She's a coward. She doesn't have the heart of a champion and all these different things because she didn't live up to what other people wanted her to do, which was to bring home the gold. But the reality is that we don't always know everything that people are dealing with. You know, the Bible says in 1 Corinthians, so don't make judgments about anyone ahead of time before the Lord returns, for he will bring our darkest secrets to light and will reveal our private motives. Then God will give to each one whatever praise is due. So, my friends, I hope that as you're looking at these Olympics, maybe God is revealing some lessons to you. If so, let me know in the comment section below. But I think there's some great lessons we can learn from not only Sha'Carri Richardson, not only the world's #1 tennis player Novak Djokovic, but also Simone Biles and a host of other athletes as well. If you found this video helpful in any way, feel free to share it with a friend. Also, if you haven't done so already, I would love it if you would subscribe. Check out some of the other videos on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on The Beat.